Imagine this. A mother, 29 years old, walks out of her apartment, hears her 2-year-old son's desperate cries, and leaves him alone for 6 days. Why? To live the dream vacation in the Bahamas with a 33-year-old con artist. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. A choice driven by obsession, escape, and a dangerous fantasy of a perfect life. But when the truth finally caught up with her, the consequences were devastating. And the price of her selfish decision was beyond anything she could have imagined. Stay with me, because what happens next will make you question the dark side of chasing luxury at any cost. Welcome to True Crimes Unlimited, where the darkest secrets meet the brightest minds. I'm your host, and I'll be guiding you to the most shocking, the most disturbing, and most fascinating true crime stories from around the world. From the twisted minds of serial killers to the intricate webs of deceit, we'll dive into the depths of human nature and explore the crimes that will leave you speechless. And as we unravel the mysteries, you'll be drawn into a world of intrigue, suspense, and fascination. So, if you're ready to delve into the unknown, to confront the darkness, and uncover the truth, then join me on this journey into the world of true crime. Subscribe now, and let's uncover the secrets together. In the gritty, unforgiving streets of Detroit, Brielle Harper's story began in the shadows. Raised by a mother who couldn't hold it together and a father who wasn't around, Brielle's early years were marked by instability. By the time she was 10, her world was a constant shuffle from one group home to the next, each new place just another reminder that love and security were luxuries she could never count on. But in the chaos, she learned something powerful. Beauty and boldness could get her noticed, and attention was a key to survival. As a teenager, Brielle became the center of attention wherever she went. With a natural flair for fashion and a charisma that drew people to her, she quickly realized she could turn heads without saying a word. It wasn't about being loved. It was about being wanted, and that was enough to make her feel important in a world that had often left her feeling invisible. But Brielle wasn't satisfied with just the attention. She didn't want to just be another face in the crowd. She craved the luxury, the lifestyle, the type of life that was flaunted by Instagram influencers who seemed to live in a dream world, untouched by the struggles that defined Brielle's existence. High school came and went, and Brielle, though bright, saw no point in following the traditional path. She enrolled in college, but it never felt like it was meant for her. The structure, the rules, and the idea of settling into a normal life were suffocating. Brielle had bigger dreams. Dreams of being someone special, someone different, someone who could live on her own terms, free from the constraints of everyday life. Instagram became her escape. Her world of influencers who posted curated lives filled with designer clothes, exotic vacations, and endless parties. She watched, envious, but determined to one day be one of them. Her break would come, she told herself. Her moment would arrive. Then it happened. At just 24, Brielle found out she was pregnant. The news hit her like a freight train, a total shock, and for a moment, it shook her to the core. The father? A man who had barely been in the picture. A fling, an impulse. At first, she thought about ending it, cutting ties before life could get more complicated. But something in her hesitated. Maybe, she thought, this was her chance. Maybe this child could give her the love she'd been searching for, something real amidst the empty promises of attention and admiration. But as the months went by, the reality of motherhood started to settle in. The sleepless nights, the endless diaper changes, and the constant need for care. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the luxury life she had envisioned. She had to sacrifice the carefree days of socializing, partying, and chasing the next high. And with every missed night out, every moment spent wiping away spit up or rocking Elijah to sleep, Brielle's resentment started to bubble up. She began to see Elijah as an obstacle, a burden that kept her from the life she truly wanted. As Elijah's first birthday came and went, Brielle found herself stuck between the life she was living and the life she was dreaming of. She watched influencers on Instagram, their perfect families, their carefree vacations, their luxury lifestyles. It gnawed at her. Here she was, a 29-year-old woman who wanted more, who deserved more, but Elijah stood in her way. He wasn't a cute accessory to her online persona. He was a constant reminder of the life she had been forced into. Brielle felt trapped by the demands of motherhood, trapped by the ordinary life that had never been part of her plan. And so, Brielle made a decision. The escape plan had been forming in the back of her mind for months, and now, it seemed like the perfect time to act. She began to research luxury vacations, looking for the escape she so desperately needed. And then she found him, KJ Cortez, a 33-year-old fraudster with a reputation for living large, a man who seemed to have everything that Brielle wanted. His Instagram was a dream come true: luxury cars, private jets, 5-star hotels, and designer clothes. To Brielle, he was the ticket to the life she had always longed for. She slid into his DMs. There was no hesitation, no small talk, just a blunt message. "You got a spot for me?" She had no idea what she was getting into, but she knew one thing. This could be her way out. KJ was more than happy to entertain her. He invited her to the Bahamas, promising a luxurious getaway that would take her far away from her responsibilities. And without a second thought, Brielle packed her bags, leaving Elijah behind. What Brielle didn't know, however, was that this decision would be the beginning of a dangerous path, one that would change her life and Elijah's forever. Brielle had made up her mind. The decision to leave Elijah behind for 6 days wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a calculated escape, a desperate act to chase the life she believed she deserved. She had found the perfect opportunity to break free from the ordinary life that had shackled her. Her route? A luxurious trip to Bahamas, where a 33-year-old fraudster named KJ Cortez promised to offer the world she'd only seen on Instagram. But in that moment, Brielle couldn't see the danger. All she could see was an alluring fantasy, a glamorous escape. KJ Cortez, a 23-year-old scam artist based in Scottsdale, Arizona, was everything Brielle had been waiting for. His Instagram profile was a paradise of flashy cars, penthouse apartments, and private jets. His life seemed like a dream come true, a world where nothing was out of reach. What Brielle didn't know was that KJ's luxurious empire wasn't built on hard work. It was built on lies, identity theft, fraudulent business loans, and a web of deceit that he wove to create his perfect life. But Brielle wasn't looking for the truth. She was looking for a way out. And KJ was her escape ticket. With no hesitation, she followed him on Instagram and with a few bold words slid into his DMs. "You got a spot for me?" There was no second guessing, no waiting for the right moment. Brielle was hungry for freedom, hungry for luxury, and KJ was ready to offer it all. What followed next was surreal. KJ responded almost immediately, inviting Brielle to join in the Bahamas for an unforgettable vacation. A vacation where champagne flowed, the sun always shone, and the lifestyle was everything Brielle had dreamed of. In that moment, everything else, her responsibilities, her past, faded into the background. She didn't stop to think about the implications, the questions from her friends, or the fact that her 2-year-old son was left behind. She didn't even say goodbye. Brielle packed her bags, leaving Elijah with a sippy cup and a blanket, thinking, "He's fine. It's just for 6 days." That was all it took. A simple choice, a choice that, at the time, felt like liberation. As Brielle boarded the plane, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. The weight of motherhood, the sleepless nights, the endless duties, vanished with every mile between her and home. This was her moment, and it felt right. She was on her way to a world that only existed in her wildest dreams. But what Brielle couldn't see, what no one could foresee, was that Elijah was alone in the dark, with no one to care for him. There were no messages from her mother, no check-ins from a friend. Brielle was living in her fantasy, a world where everything was perfect and there were no consequences for her actions. The next 6 days were like a fever dream. Brielle was completely immersed in the world KJ had created for her. Yachts and designer boutiques became her reality. Each day was filled with lavish experiences, shopping sprees, gourmet dinners, and endless selfies. The Bahamas was everything she'd imagined, and more. She posted pictures and updates to her Instagram, crafting the image of the perfect life, living for the likes, basking in the attention, and ignoring everything that was happening back home. Not once did Brielle check in on Elijah. Not once did she stop to think about the little boy who was trapped in an empty apartment, crying for his mother, not understanding why she had walked out his life for days. Day after day, Brielle lived in her Instagram bubble. Each photo was more polished than the last, each post more curated, as she lived for the attention, the validation, the approval. But deep down, a nagging thought started to rise. What was Elijah doing right now? Was he okay? The thought would come in a fleeting moment, like a shadow passing through her consciousness, but she would quickly push it aside. She had worked hard for this life, or so she told herself. She deserved this escape, and so she didn't look back. The party continued, more yachts, more champagne, more shopping, and each day felt more surreal than the last. Brielle was living the high life, but with every passing moment, the tension was building back home. Brielle didn't know it yet, but every second she spent in paradise, every second she spent avoiding reality, was leading to a reckoning. Back in Cleveland, Elijah was alone. No one knew that a mother, on a vacation of a lifetime, had left her child to suffer in silence. Brielle's paradise was just that, a dream, a mirage. And while she lived for the likes, the luxury and the freedom, the truth was creeping closer, ready to shatter everything. But Brielle wasn't the only one chasing something. KJ Cortez, the man who had promised her this dream, had his own secrets. He had built a life of lies, using stolen identities and fraudulent schemes to fund his lifestyle. But even KJ couldn't outrun the truth forever. The FBI was already on his trail, closing in on the house of cards he had built. As the days passed in the Bahamas, Brielle's escape was nearing its end. What would happen when the vacation ended? Would the dream world she had created for herself survive the truth? As we move toward the shocking revelations of Brielle's choice, ask yourself, how far would you go to escape reality? Would you walk away from everything for the life you always wanted, no matter who was left behind? Stay tuned, because the next chapter of the story is going to expose the truth that no one saw coming. Day 6. The sun had barely set over pristine shores of Bahamas, where Brielle had spent the last few days living the life she always dreamed of. The music was still thumping inside the villa, the champagne still flowing, and Brielle was snapping another selfie, blissfully unaware that reality was closing around her. But in the shadows of this picture-perfect paradise, a storm was brewing, and it wouldn't be long before it came crashing down. The FBI had been watching KJ Cortez for months. His flashy lifestyle, funded by a criminal empire built on identity theft and fraudulent loans, had finally caught the attention of law enforcement. What they didn't know was that KJ wasn't the only one playing a dangerous game. Brielle, too, was about to face the consequences of her reckless decisions. The agents moved fast. Brielle, still in her glamorous vacation mode, didn't see it coming. The FBI stormed the luxury villa where KJ had promised her the world. Before she could even react, agents were on her, cuffing her and leading her out of the villa. In the chaos, her mind raced. What was happening? What had gone wrong? As KJ was dragged away in handcuffs, Brielle froze. The fantasy that had been her escape, her refuge, was crumbling. And in that moment, as the reality of the situation hit her, she couldn't stop the words from tumbling out. Her voice cracked as she blurted out, "My son, I have a son." It was too late. The damage had already been done. The paradise she had dreamed was now just a memory, and the consequences were catching up with her faster than she could process. Back in Cleveland, the sound of Elijah's cries had not gone unnoticed. For days, neighbors had heard the faint sound of the child crying, desperately calling out for someone, for anyone to come. But no one had taken action, not until now. A call to 911 had set things in motion. The police were on their way. They arrived, knocking on the door, calling out, but there was no response. Something was wrong. The officers made a decision to break in. As they forced open the door to Brielle's apartment, they were met with a silence so heavy it felt suffocating. The only sounds were their footsteps echoing through the empty apartment. They found Elijah, lifeless, curled up on the cold floor, his tiny body barely recognizable in the dim light. A bottle lay next to him, empty, a diaper soaked through, the kind of neglect no child should ever experience. The apartment was a stark contrast to the image Brielle had crafted for herself in the Bahamas. There were no designer clothes, no luxury vacation, just an abandoned child, forgotten in the darkness. The officers checked for a pulse. The room stood still as one of them called for medical assistance. But it was already too late. Elijah's tiny body had been left alone for far too long. Back in the Bahamas, Brielle was being escorted to a waiting car, her mind still spinning in disbelief. The agents had her in custody now, and they were bringing her back to Cleveland. They weren't going to let her run away from this one. But Brielle wasn't yet fully aware of what she was about to face. Arriving at the police station, she was led into an interrogation room. The harsh fluorescent lights flickered above her, the weight of her choices pressing down on her shoulders. For the first time, Brielle was forced to face the consequences of her actions. The detectives didn't waste any time. They sat across from her, watching her every move, their faces unreadable. Brielle, shaken and confused, tried to defend herself. She claimed that she had left food for Elijah, that he had everything he needed to survive, and that he was fine when she left. But the detectives weren't buying it. They stared at her, emotionless. The room felt suffocating. Brielle's excuses, her feeble attempts at explaining, fell flat in the face of the undeniable truth. They weren't there to sympathize with her. They were there to expose the gravity of her choices. The silence stretched between them as the truth settled like a heavy weight. She could no longer hide behind the fantasy she had built. He was just a child, one of the detectives finally said, his voice cold. You left him alone. How do you explain that? Brielle's eyes began to well with tears, but she had no answers. Nothing she said could undo what she had done. The day had finally come. Brielle Harper, once the face of Instagram perfection, now sat in a courtroom, stripped of the glamour and attention she once craved. The cold, sterile atmosphere of the courthouse was a far cry from the luxury she had once flaunted. The same social media posts she had used to curate her flawless life now served as damning evidence against her. The prosecutor stood tall, ready to dismantle Brielle's defense, armed with the very things she had once used to build her false paradise. Designer labels, expensive cocktails, hashtags like #blessed, #softlife, and more. Each post painted a picture of a woman living without consequence, without responsibility, a stark contrast to the heartbreaking reality of her abandoned child. With every piece of evidence, the prosecutor highlighted the truth. Brielle's choices were not those of a struggling mother, but a woman actively running from her responsibilities. The courtroom was tense, the weight of the prosecution's argument hanging over Brielle like a dark cloud. Brielle had built an online persona that many had envied, flawless, carefree, living in a world of opulence and luxury. But now, the very images that once painted her as the dream woman were coming back to haunt her. One by one, the prosecutor displayed her Instagram photos. There she was, lounging in designer swimsuits, popping bottles in expensive nightclubs, smiling in front of luxury cars. This is the woman who chose a vacation in Bahamas over the welfare of her son, the prosecutor stated, locking eyes with the jury. The comparison was undeniable, and as the prosecutor walked through each post, it became clear that Brielle had chosen her selfish desire for luxury over the most basic duty a mother had, to care for her child. But Brielle's defense was ready. Her attorney, standing with a somber expression, appealed to the jury's compassion. They argued that Brielle wasn't just a woman looking for luxury. She was a victim of postpartum depression, emotional trauma, and a history of neglect that had led her to this point. Her attorney painted a picture of a mother who had lost her way, someone who was trying to escape a painful reality. They pleaded for mercy, claiming Brielle was overwhelmed, trapped in a cycle of depression that clouded her judgment. She didn't abandon her child out of malice, the defense lawyer argued. She ran away because she couldn't handle the weight of motherhood. Her mind was shattered, and in that fragile state, she made a catastrophic mistake. The defense was trying to shift the narrative, to present Brielle not as a monster, but as a woman in need of help. It was a tactic to pull the jury's heartstrings, but it didn't hold up under the harsh light of the prosecution's evidence. Then came the moment that sealed Brielle's fate. The jury deliberated, the room silent with anticipation. The defense had done its best to humanize Brielle, to offer an explanation for her reckless behavior. But the evidence, especially the cold reality of Elijah's abandonment, was too powerful to ignore. After what felt like hours, the jury returned with a verdict. Brielle Harper was sentenced to life in prison without parole. There were no second chances, no time for redemption. The cold truth was that Brielle's escape, her dream vacation, had come at a deadly cost. As the gavel slammed down, the courtroom was filled with a collective exhale. The public's response was mixed. Some felt sympathy for Brielle, citing her troubled past and emotional struggles, while others believed that the price of her freedom was far too high. Brielle had chosen to live a fantasy, and it had cost her everything. The headlines would write themselves: Mother sentenced to life for abandoning Toddler while chasing fantasy. Her name was now synonymous with irresponsibility, a cautionary tale for anyone tempted to chase their dreams at the expense of their children. K.J. Cortez, the man who had promised Brielle the world, was not exempt from the consequences of his actions. He was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison for his role in the fraudulent empire he had built. The same luxury he flaunted on Instagram was now gone, replaced by the cold, harsh reality of prison life. The man who had once lured Brielle into his world of deception was now facing the truth of his own choices. The case sparked a wave of public debate. The courtroom had divided the community, and everyone seemed to have an opinion. Some sympathized with Brielle, blaming the pressures of modern life and mental health issues for her decisions. Others felt there could be no excuse for what she had done. A child left to die alone could never be justified. Was Brielle a victim of circumstances? A woman who had been abandoned by society, ignored by those around her, and trapped in a cycle of emotional pain? Or was she simply someone who chose selfishness over responsibility, who took advantage of her circumstances and abandoned the one person who depended on her the most? As the cameras flashed and the public's opinion continued to divide, one thing was clear. Elijah had paid the ultimate price for his mother's escape, and no amount of social media likes or luxury vacations could bring him back. Was Brielle a monster, or was she simply a woman lost in the wrong dream? She chased a fantasy, hoping it would fill the emptiness inside her. But at what cost? Elijah, a 2-year-old boy, was left alone in the dark, forgotten in the chaos of his mother's desires. Could Elijah have been saved if someone had just knocked sooner? If someone had heard his cries and acted, would things have turned out differently? The truth is, there are countless children like him, suffering in silence, neglected and forgotten. How many more are out there, waiting for someone to notice? This story isn't just about Brielle or Elijah. It's about what we choose to ignore. The signs of neglect, the cries for help, the moments we brush off as someone else's responsibility. We cannot let this happen again. If you hear something, say something. If you see something, do something. It's up to us to be the voices for those who can't speak for themselves. If this story shook you, don't just scroll past. Hit that subscribe button right now and become part of the True Crime Unlimited family. We're exposing the truth, breaking the silence, and diving deep into the stories that matter most. Comment below, share your thoughts, and let's raise awareness together. We need 10,000 subscribers to make sure these stories reach everyone, and you can help make that happen. Subscribe now and join us in uncovering the truth